Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Heather Wallander joins us today. She is the founder of JustiProof. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me on.
We'd like to start, as we usually do. I want to hear about your path and how you got started in technology. And I know you've done a little bit, or I shouldn't say a little bit, but you've done some on the security side as well, but definitely a lot in the application development. And just bring us through your career and to where you're at today.
I started out I was actually in outside sales and went into marketing for my bachelor's, then got into that field and did not like it. And so I wanted to really focus on the technology. I realized what I was most interested in was the data around A/B testing and things like that. And I ended up actually going back to school for my master's in information systems and took my first ever programming course. It was actually Visual Basic. And ironically, I actually just saw the professor I took that course with yesterday. But I fell in love with coding. It's something I don't think I would have ever enrolled in on my own if it hadn't been a required class, but I just loved it. I've always loved puzzles, and I think I kind of see it the same way. And then that got me started in engineering. And then eventually I went into sales engineering, but helping out on the specialist team to help engineers implement a more technical solution, because that allowed me to both balance working with others, which I really enjoy, and applying the technical background, the coding, being able to still get in. And even now, while I'm building my own app, I can get lost in a coding project and find that balance where I want to throw my computer out the window, but also that euphoria of finding the solution that you couldn't find for hours.
Well, I remember talking about coding when I was an engineering student. Now, I wouldn't say that what I did was coding per se, because we were coding for a specific calculation output, and we used Fortran 77 because of its precision. So less about doing apps and more about doing complex calculations. But back then, coding was a little bit challenging because I would get the response from the printout. I'm kind of showing my age here, also by talking about Fortran 77, and it wouldn't tell me like what was wrong when it was trying to compile the program, and I found it extraordinarily frustrating. Is coding now a little bit less frustrating than, say, the dark ages of like the 80s?
Yeah, I mean, it has a trace back, so you can actually see like where's the file, like where is the actual error occurring. I mean, certainly though, I'm sure I'm speaking for anyone who's ever run into a problem, like you can still miss a comma, for example, and have
Mm-hmm.
that throw everything off and struggle to find it. There are still these like syntax issues or whatnot, like once in a while, depending on the IDE that you're running in and the environment you're using. But it's I would say it's a little bit better. There's still a lot of printing involved. I'll say that. At least for me, when I code, I still do a lot of printing so I can see, where the error is coming, like what variable is not getting passed correctly or whatnot, and then having to remove those all before they go back to prod.
So I want to stay on this app thing just for a moment before diving into JustiProof. But let's just say I have an idea for an app. I have a business problem that I want to solve. I think it would be great to create an app for it, but I have no idea where to go. I'm not a coder. I'm, I mean, I could learn how to do it, but I don't want to. I just want to solve the problem. What is the best way for someone that would be in my position for them to travel along that path? Because I'm sure there are a lot of folks out there that are thinking it's like, I have a great idea for an app, but I don't know what to do with it.
I think it really depends on the complexity with it. So ours has to have a backend, and what I mean by that is having something that's secure with the database, with a way to connect those pieces and pull them in. So it can't just be like a web app that's user facing or client facing, meaning that they can use like a tool like Wix or like Squarespace, where you can actually create a website, because those tools will allow you to create a landing page and do a lot of stuff like a blog, or I don't know if you want to post recipes or whatever it is. So you could put an app out there. But if you want to do something that has to have some of the information locked down and protected, my recommendation would probably be to go either reach out to any friends you have that have that background, or there are apps out there like Y Combinator, and I know there are others that have like founder matching, and you can actually say, hey, I'm a founder, I have this idea, I'm looking for I'm product, or I'm marketing, or I'm sales, or whatever it is, and I'm looking for an engineering co-founder. And oftentimes engineers are looking for that other persona, because that's the level that they don't want to do. So you can go on one of those, because ultimately, if you need to code, it's you'll need somebody to help you, or you'll need to learn how to code, which I guess is the other option. You could take like a code academy or something along those lines and learn how to do it. It might just take you a little bit longer.
I'd be a little afraid about learning how to do it, because anything that you learn how to do, you learn from making mistakes, and I think that that's a great idea to match someone. I think you said founder is the term, with an engineer, and you said there are sites for this. Is that like a Fiverr or something like that?
You could go on a Fiverr. Yeah, so actually, great point. I didn't even think about that. You can also contract out that work. So you could
Hmm.
contact. I think one of the things that would make me nervous if you fully contracted out the work is the a lot of people can throw together code, like, and make it work and do things that look great on the surface, but maybe are very insecure,
Yeah.
or are not protected. And so there's definitely something to be said about not having somebody invested to the same level in that security. Because even for us, like, I do not have a security background. I have enough of a background to know the tools, like the pen testing and things like that, to run my systems through. And that's top of mind for me with my app. And at some point, we're going to have to hire somebody to do the security, because it's extremely important to make sure that's being locked down. And that would be my fear. If you don't know how to code and you're just
Yeah.
outsourcing, is making sure that it is secure if it needs to be.
I think that's a great point, and it touches on security, of course, which is more of a sweet spot for me. We always like try to advise businesses that, particularly if they're coding, what we're going to ask is like, okay, how do you verify your code? Do you do code reviews? Do you have like is it like a peer code review, or is it like third party? Do you run it through something like a service like a Veracode or something like that? And then of course doing the external testing, the penetration testing, and all that. And I'm absolutely certain that the best I would be at coding would be at introducing vulnerabilities, and I just can't do that, so I'm not going to do that. But let's talk a little bit more. What actually drew me to inviting you on the podcast was your story with JustiProof, and um, instead of me regurgitating anything that I've learned, the little bit I've learned about the application, why don't you start from the beginning of what it is and why you developed it?
So I developed it because I went through an experience over 19 months within a company where I was fighting discrimination, or what I should say is actually really trying to raise awareness of what I was experiencing through HR and leadership, and trying to seek help. And unfortunately, I was not able to get the support I needed. So ultimately, I ended up leaving the company. And part of that was me trying to start out on my own path to build something that could help other people fight back, because I found the entire experience just very daunting. I think a lot of people going through this don't realize how much is on them to capture the evidence, to store that information. But also, you are taking company documents, so you need to make sure that those documents are secure as well, because you can't have them getting out from something that you've captured. And so I really wanted to help people kind of understand what their options are, how to start pursuing, getting help externally if they're finding that internally they are being failed. So it really kind of is a labor of love, in the sense of just wanting to help others kind of save some time and be a little less overwhelmed by the entire experience and everything they have to do.
In this it spoke to me, because at one point in my career, I found myself in a situation which I would describe as a toxic work environment, uh, and as time has gone on, I've had I've been able to talk more and more about it. But at the time, I had left a long-standing job that I was very comfortable at, and everybody that you worked with was very respectful and very open, and there was a lot of teamwork involved, to another environment that, quite honestly, for lack of a better word, involved backstabbing and stepping over people. I didn't feel like I had any option to turn to, and I didn't even think about going to HR, because I was worried about, um, quite honestly, about retaliation if somehow or another me going to HR got back to my supervisor. Uh, so I'm trying to take my experience and marry it with the app here. How can somebody start the process of gathering information? Well, first of all, Do you still suggest that they go to HR first if they're having issues like this?
I do think you have to go to HR at some point, because you have to give the company a chance to correct the situation,
Right.
HR leadership. But I will say, I actually wrote a blog post on this, that you really, in my opinion, only have one chance with HR, because if something is going on and HR fails you, or does a fails to act, I should say, and let's say it goes on for another 6 months. Well, now because HR, the path that you were supposed to go to get help, has failed you, well, they're less inclined to admit that they messed up, because now they're going to be they are, by doing so, they make themselves vulnerable to potential consequences if you pursue legal action or something along those lines. And so what you'll see is they often will double down. At least that's what my experience is and what I've heard from others. And so yes, you should go to HR, but you should go to HR prepared. I think a lot of us go to HR, including myself, go to HR initially for some level of validation. We think we're going to give them all the evidence, and we think we know what's going on, but we're hoping that they will be like, oh yes, you're right, this is definitely discrimination. And that is just not what they're going to do. You have to be very certain. And what I will say is, the app that we created was really meant to help people kind of get the clarity they need before they go to HR. One of the upcoming iterations will actually be to help you form what you will say to HR based on some of the incidents that you've captured,
Mm.
because you need to be very specific in what you say, how you present that story and the evidence, so that they know that they should be compelled to act now, because now they can do the right thing that first time you come to them. Now company is not liable. They didn't know. Once they did know, they acted. But if you don't come with a solid story, if you don't come with the evidence you need, they are not going to risk terminating that person, and opening themselves up to consequences on that end, based on, a hunch that maybe what you're saying is true because you seem authentic, if that makes sense. So yes, you have to go to HR, but do it when you're prepared. So start capturing that information. And in your situation, for example, what you may have found in that situation, and you've done it, was if you actually created a timeline, if you actually captured all this evidence, those things start to become a lot clearer when you just see it on paper. It's actually very um it's crazy how you can have it all in your head, but it's not until you see the timeline, you see everything together, that you're like, oh yeah, no, this is definitely what I think it is. Because the pattern starts to become clear, because discrimination, toxic workplaces, abuse, those things are so nuanced these days. They're
Mhm.
often a bunch of it's a million little cuts, not one major.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
exactly it's exactly right. It's exactly how it felt with me. And you mentioned termination, and I think back in I don't I think that I forced myself not to want to go to HR because I had seen what had happened with a coworker. This was in government, and in government, once you get past a certain point, you have like it's almost impossible to fire you. And I can't remember the term. I'm just drawing a blank what the term is. It's a I can't believe I'm not remembering. It's like as simple as like what's the color of traffic lights? Green. I mean
Yeah.
something like that. But it's just it's on the tip of your tongue. But I remember there was this one person who went down the HR path, and apparently, I'm guessing that they didn't have the documentation that they needed. And in retaliation, this person was removed from all of the projects that they were working on. They were put in a subordinate role, and basically, from a cultural standpoint, they were the leadership, for lack of a better way to put it, encouraged staying away from that person. That was actually explained to me that as advice when I first started, which I didn't know what to do, what to do with that. So I think having an app like this would prevent folks like me who want to old school. We want to quote unquote man up and just like adult through it. It's like I'll push through it. It'll be fine. That's what I ended up doing. But it was very stressful. But documentation is the first place without a doubt, and trying to figure out how to do that and what to do. Can you dive into a little bit more of the detail about what documentation we should be looking for, how the app helps with that, and why? I think most importantly.
So the app will actually help guide you with what you should be capturing. So it'll read, like if you put in an incident, for example, it'll be like, hey, you mentioned your performance review, or you mentioned that you sent this email, like you should capture that. Or if there were witnesses, it will even say like you should document what witnesses are there. Because what you just touched on is very, very common, is not knowing how to begin. And one of the things for myself, even the timelines I created initially, I can tell you, I go back on them and they are scattered. They are not concise. They include a lot of context that's not relevant. And it kind of, and also evidence that's like I include all the evidence, right? Because that's what you end up doing. You either don't do anything or you capture everything. And unfortunately, capturing everything can be just as damaging.
Or
Because
even worse, it's overwhelming, right? Yeah.
yeah, and when you relay that to HR, or you relay that to an attorney, or you relay that to a government agency because you're seeking help, like through the EEOC or whatnot, your important details, the important incidents that they can act on, get lost in all of that information. And so, what our app does is help you both. The AI overlay will help you guide towards what you should be capturing, but then it also helps you organize all of that. So even if you end up like I did with, I end up having 30 plus pages of evidence, and there is not really a great way to simplify that. So what you have to do is organize it and be able to find, like, clean that up around the incidents of like, here is where you can go to find that evidence. So you create that appendix, you create those attachments, you create that organization. And that's really what the app does, is it allows you to, if you need help knowing what to capture, it'll help you guide towards that. And if you need help organizing because you've captured too much, which was essentially my issue with relaying my story, it'll help you do that. And then it will also help you boil down to like, here are the top incidents that you need to be focused on. Because when you go to get help, HR, lawyers, the government agencies, they're really wanting to initially hear a couple of key things that will say, oh yes, this is a case for us to continue forward with. So for example, one of the big triggers on mine that always got someone's attention was not being promoted because my boss told me I was high strung. That is a very, very important incident because it impacts my pay. It impacts something tangible. It is something that they can go back and specifically be like, okay, you're saying you didn't say this, then what did you say? And so people need guidance on that. And that's really what the app does, is help you navigate so that you can just focus on capturing the evidence. And then we're going to help you build that story.
Yeah, and I was thinking while you were talking about that I can almost imagine that if there are people out here who have not been through any sort of workplace toxicity or discrimination or retaliation, some of this might sound very simplistic, but if you're actually in the moment, it's very hard to convey just how lost you feel, and having any sort of anchor to help with the process helps. Like you talk about the retaliation aspect. I remember one point where I was like a half a month away from my 6-month probationary period ended, and as retaliation, I was told, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. Your probation's almost up. Whereas like 2 days beforehand, I was given a glowing praise for the job that I was doing. I never knew what type of person my boss was going to be the next day. And that's sort of like walking on eggshells. I knew it. I knew I needed to get. I just didn't know where to turn to. It's a so again, back to the point. Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
Okay. We're back.
All right.
Get back to. We're still here. I get back to the point that some people may not realize just how stressful this can be in the moment. It's not just like, well, I could do that with like file system, just put it in folders. Like, no, you definitely need something with the app. For someone wanting to investigate this further, how would they do that? What's your website for it?
So you can just go to JustiProof.com. So it's justice almost all the way spelled without the C and the E. So justi, so JUSTI, and then just proof. So if you look that up, it'll come up at just JustiProof.com. And then from there, you can actually sign up. You can register for the demo. We're getting ready to actually launch some features so that people can play around with it a bit more early on. And I just want to emphasize, to the point that you made, that I definitely realize this sounds simple enough. And believe me, if you would have told me how much time I would spend over the course of my fight documenting this stuff and rearranging, I wouldn't have believed it. But I am so thankful for the app now and for the organization I have now, because it's time consuming and it's hard to do when you're in it. But yeah, go to the app, the JustiProof, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Heather Wallander, and then from there you can pretty much see all the links to anything I am posting about or sharing there.
Now, this is not the first app that you have been working on. You were working on something called Brio Edge. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yep.
You want to briefly mention that?
So that was very similar. It's on pause right now, but it is something I plan to continue because it is a tool I think companies need. And it does actually really apply not just to a class that's discriminated against, but to something I think every single employee can relate to: subjectivity in performance reviews. And this can apply. I had somebody comment the other day that somebody was let go because they didn't have enough feminine touch. Now, the reality is that most likely the person probably meant, we're trying to appeal to women and in the content you're creating is not appealing to women or something along those lines. But we have to remove that subjectivity out of the statement so people say what they actually mean, because that is what leads to people being frustrated, disconnecting from the workplace, checking out, and you not getting your full potential from them. So the Brio Edge tool kind of tackles this problem from a different place. It tackles it from improving leadership and helping guide leadership towards being less subjective in their reviews. And then it also had a system where there was a check and balance where a director would be responsible for capturing or for reviewing any of their managers who also had subjectivity in their reviews, especially if there was a disagreement or a misalignment between what the peer rated themselves and what the manager rated them. And that also stemmed from my fight because I was a top performer. And so when I had a director that suddenly was kind of trying to push me towards the middle of the pack or try to indicate that maybe I was not performing as previous leaders had, this could have sounded that alarm bell to directors or to above even directors, so that somebody could have taken action and stepped in, even if that's just coaching. Because that's the thing, is I'm not out to go after everybody. I'm out to just make it a better workplace for all of us, because I want all of us to be able to feel like we can succeed.
No, I think that's great. Appreciate the work that you're doing and definitely want to continue to follow. But a lot of this can be stressful, not only working in the technology, the security and the technology fields, but also being an entrepreneur and especially, and one more time, getting back to my experience as well too, and your experience being in that environment where it's not a happy place to go to. That work environment gets very stressful, and you need to do something to de-stress. I always tell folks that you got to take care of yourself first. To try to remind them every time on this podcast. I think one of your de-stressing items, it sounds like, is developing a solution for a problem, which I think is great. Anything else that you do to help get away from those stresses?
It's funny to say that. It actually is definitely feeling like I can do something about it. Definitely makes me feel somewhat better. But the other thing is, I have 2 English bulldogs. In fact, one of them is a puppy. She's about to turn 1, and we actually got her because I was going through this, and just my husband was like, "All right, you want another puppy? We'll get another puppy." And I got lucky because our first dog is also very sweet and very loving. Anyone who's ever had an English bulldog will tell you they're cuddlers and they're just loves. But our youngest one is literally the happiest dog. And people tell us that all the time. Like, I've never interacted with a dog so happy. She is just pure joy every day. And so I like taking them out to the park, or even just spending some time with them. You can't look at their goofy little faces and not smile. And so I would say that they are absolutely, what has saved my sanity throughout this is they are just pure love, pure happiness, pure simplicity. And you can't get much better than that when you're kind of going through something like this.
Yeah, we're dog lovers too. My wife and I, about 5 years ago, we adopted a Chihuahua Pomeranian mix, and you want to talk about a Jekyll Hyde temper? Oh boy! But she's cute too. So I mean, she's one wonderful pup. Future plans?
Future plans is to continue building out this app. I kind of joke that I'm, fumbling along, kind of flailing along, I love data and I love, running the numbers, seeing what's working. And so trying to figure out how to do this around this founder journey has been interesting. It's a lot of new things. And so right now I'm just continuing to do trial and error to get the word out, build these apps out. And for me, ultimately, the number one thing is just making sure that I'm sharing what I've learned, so that even no matter what happens with the app, no matter what happens with JustiProof or Brio Edge, I'm helping somebody out there who's maybe going through this. Because, unfortunately, when I was going through it, there weren't a lot of people talking about it. So I'm going to keep talking about it, and I'm going to keep sharing, what I've learned, and hopefully helping people along if they are going through this. So if anyone is, follow along, and hopefully some of the content can help you out.
I love the servant attitude. I like to say that if you have a heart of a servant, you're always going to be successful. And I love your story. Thank you so much for sharing it. That's JustiProof. We talked about the link beforehand. Best of luck to you and to the app. And again, appreciate your time, Heather.
Thank you so much, Greg.
And for everybody out there, just a reminder, if you haven't checked out Tech Talk on Now Media Television, you can join me every Thursday at 4 Central. It's nowmedia.tv. If you're interested on being on Tech Talk, just let me know. Send me a DM. And until then, appreciate your time as always, and stay secure.